Well, good morning and welcome to our video today. This is our second day in a row with a live video. It's our regular Thursday time, so thanks for tuning in and watching us. We've got a great topic today that is a nice summary of many of the things that we discuss here. We talk about all sorts of different communication channels at Concordia Technology Solutions. Last summer, we led a whole series called the Church Online Communications Comprehensive. And we covered the whole gamut of things from social media to websites to email and more. Now, that course was actually the second part of what I had originally done as a single presentation at the Best Practices for Ministry Conference in Phoenix, Arizona. And as I was going through that presentation, so this thing that ended up becoming 14 weeks, I did in about an hour. So there's a lot of information packed in at once. And at that presentation, I was asked the question, well, how do we get this all done? And that's a really good question, and everybody kind of nodded their heads in agreement. And it got me thinking about that and just how important it was to understand how to do each of those tasks. And that's really what led to that creation of the 14-week course, to take it into more bite-sized pieces. Well, that lady who asked me that question, we continued that conversation over the next several months, and she is joining me today, Stacy Yates. She is the Communication Director at Holy Trinity Lutheran Church in Edmond, Oklahoma. Stacy, thanks for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So, Stacy, tell us a little bit about yourself and your role there as Communication Director.
I started out in the corporate world at a technology company in their marketing department and worked there for about 5 years on a team of, there was three of us, and I worked doing events and working on their social and all different types of things. And I have been a diaper Lutheran, and I attended church here at Holy Trinity, and we had a part-time communication director, and they started realizing that this position was more of a full-time position. And I got asked to actually be on the hiring committee, and we thought we found our person and we thought everything was great. And then the person decided not to take the job. And I started realizing that, it was something that I should be doing. And I felt that God was really pulling me to use my skills in communication here at my church, but also in being a Lutheran and sharing an amazing message and who we are as Lutherans. And so that's where I ended up here at Holy Trinity, and I've been here for about 3 years, and it's been great. I work with our school and our church doing communication, and I also work, as you all probably know, in the church world, you wear many hats. So there's days that it doesn't seem like it's all communications all the time, but as a team, we really come together, and my focus is getting our message out, connecting our ministries with our church, our congregation, but also getting out in our community and talking with them. So
That's fantastic. And I think that's really neat because you're not what we might consider a mega church there. But yesterday we talked about vocations and some of the new vocations that technology has created. And communications director at a church is a fairly new thing, but I mean, you've been doing that for 3 years. So that's exciting, and it's been fun talking with you and hearing how that's progressed for you. So
yeah.
this is your first time on our video. You also wrote a blog post for us this week, which is titled Choosing Communication Channels Based on Your Audience. And I appreciate you writing it. It's a fantastic post. We've already gotten good comments here internally on our team about how much they enjoyed it. So let's dig into that a little bit. And you start off the post really just talking about audiences and starting with the audience. So can you explain a little bit more why audience is the first thing we should be thinking about in terms of communication?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that if you don't know who you're trying to reach, then your message is not going to be effective. You really need to take time to know what will connect with them and what will resonate with them. So starting with knowing who your audience is, and I know there's been other blog posts and the comprehensive that you had done, there was something where you talked specifically about your audience. And I think that just remembering that, you can spend a lot of time crafting a message and saying, we're going to go on Facebook Live, we're going to do this. But if you don't know the why and the who and why you are trying to reach that audience, then what you're doing is not going to connect. And I think in a world where there's so much messaging out there, you are going to get lost because you're not connecting and your message isn't resonating with the audience because you didn't first take the time to understand your audience.
That's great. And you mentioned in the blog post that message is the most important message in the world. But as we look at our audience, it's not everybody in the world. Not every church should be trying to reach everyone in the world. How does a person who's doing church communications really learn who their audience is? What would you suggest?
So, although I've been a diaper Lutheran and I had been attending Holy Trinity probably for at least 4 or 5 years before I took on this role, I knew that I still had my little bubble here at the church. I was a newlywed, and now we have kids. So the people that I hang out with and the people I connect with are in my little bubble. Even though I do try to connect with other people. So what I did when I started here was I sat down with our pastors because I think they're the ones that know the congregation the best. I mean, they're baptizing the kids, they're confirming, they're doing confirmation classes with our youth, and they're going and visiting our elderly. So they have an insight that no matter how hard I tried, I probably wouldn't get because they're the pastors. So I really sat down and asked, what do they feel is most important here at Holy Trinity? And what do they want to convey to our congregation? And that really gave me the opportunity to take a step back and see how we could use our communication to connect to the majority of our congregation. And additionally, I took time to understand our community. Who lives here, and I actually met with other church communicators around our church to see what they're doing and how that's working. And I think that gave me a lot of insight to know who our audience is. But it's a continuing learning process. So
That's great that there are others in that church communication role around you, because I know many of our audience are the first ones in their area to kind of take that on. So I'm glad to hear you had that support and that advice elsewhere. So
yeah.
obviously the topic is about the combination of audiences and channels. When you first got to Holy Trinity, what channels were being utilized for communication?
So a lot of the channels that we use now were used, and I just don't think they were used to their full capacity. So we had a YouTube channel. There was a Facebook page. We did have a website, and it was there, but it wasn't being used in a way that was reaching everyone. It was kind of like, okay, here's the content. And so what I was able to do is come in and kind of look at that and take the information that I got from our pastors and understanding the audiences and see how I could use these in a more effective way and establish more of a following within those channels.
That's great. So as we talk about choosing, what it would be the danger in trying to choose all or a lot of channels? Because I know that's an easy temptation to fill on. Well, there's this other channel, we need to be on there. How do you go about thinking through that process? And I know we'll get into the framework, but what would the danger be in choosing too many?
I think that by choosing too many, you aren't going to be able to do it effective. I mean, unless you're Superwoman or Superman. I mean, there's just not enough time to devote to each panel and make sure that you're responding to comments, that you're interacting in a way that is, like I mentioned, connecting with that audience and having a meaningful conversation. So I think, trying to decide what is going to reach the most people in your congregation. For us, I feel that Facebook is something that, even though we don't have a lot of, I think there's some people that younger people, like our youth, aren't all on Facebook, but I have noticed that they do have a profile, so they do follow our church. And I hope when they log on, they do see what we're doing on Facebook. But I know that by me investing that time there, I'm reaching the majority, and I'm not spending time trying to figure out, well, I think these people are here. Should I put this here? And so I'm able to be effective by choosing certain things versus doing all the social media platforms, even though it's very enticing. Like, we're not live streaming right now. There's actually a church in Edmond. It's a Lutheran church. They're amazing, and they're live streaming, and their congregation is smaller than us, and we just haven't got there yet, because my goal is that I want it to be the best it can be, and we do it well before we just start doing it because everyone's doing it.
Yeah, and that's I think one of the things that can help comfort people who are not in all of the different channels is by saying, okay, I can't do this well at this time. Rather than doing it poorly and turning people off to the idea, let's work towards that. And I think that's a really good piece of advice for people, is to focus on that quality like you're doing. So you
Yeah,
have
absolutely.
a solution to this problem that you call the framework. Can you give us a brief description of that, and then we'll really dig into the details?
Yeah, so I call my framework kind of my basic channels that I know are effective, that I have taken time to research or look at kind of the data, the analytics of these channels, and know that that's what's working for me. And at the end of the day, if I didn't get to do everything, if I didn't get to put a message on all, I know that I'm hitting the people that I need, or the audience. I shouldn't say hitting people, sorry. I'm hitting, I am reaching people, reaching our audiences with our message by touching those channels that are in the framework that fits our church and fits our congregation.
That's great. Well, let's really get into the details. So tell me what is included in your framework, and specific channels, how you utilize them, maybe why you are utilizing them, or what audiences you're targeting with each channel. Just the real nitty gritty of your framework.
Okay, yeah. So for the first part of our framework is our website. It's where Peter, you've always called it the home base, and I love that. It really is kind of that first impression. It's where people, when they Google Holy Trinity Lutheran Church Lutheran Church and School in Edmond, Oklahoma, that's what's going to come up, and that's going to be their first impression. So that's kind of the first piece of our framework. I make sure that it not only is welcoming for visitors, but it also has information in there that our members can find. I think there's times that you visit a church website and it's just all welcoming for a visitor, which is great. But as a member, that's at midnight when I can't call into the church office. I want to be able to find some basic information about what's going on, or maybe who's on the prayer list, things like that. But I also, as a visitor, don't want to go in and feel alienated because I've never been to the church before, but all that's on their website is information about being a member, or things that it didn't really walk me through. So I think having your website as kind of that base point of your framework, and I think it's important to know how to edit and make changes. I know sometimes people will have a third-party company help them build their website, but then if they want to make an adjustment, it's, you have to know code, or, well, this is what you get. So I think it's important to research what fits your church and make sure that your website conveys who you are as a church and as a congregation. Another part of the, oh, go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt you. One of the things we talk
Yeah.
about is, your website is not, a billboard where it's up there and it's static. And like you said, when you get into a third party that sets it up, but you don't know how to use it, it becomes very static and then loses its meaning for those who are regularly attending. So I'm glad you brought that up. That's a fantastic point. Sorry to cut you off there.
Yeah, you're good. And absolutely, yeah. I think our website a few years ago, I mean, it still had like come to the potluck, or I've gone to webs that was like 3 weeks ago or 3 months ago or even 3 years ago. And I've gone to websites that says like still under construction. And so I think it's important to make sure that someone on your staff, or maybe there's a couple of people on your staff, or even a volunteer, knows how to easily go in the back end and change that information. So another part of our framework is I talk about social and being on social media and using that effectively. And yes, our church is only on 2 social media platforms, which is Facebook and YouTube. I consider YouTube, we have, I believe it's like 62 followers who anytime I post a sermon video, watch it. Our pastor does a video blog each week, and it pings them and lets them know. And then Facebook, like I mentioned earlier, is something that I feel that we are reaching a lot of people on that platform or on that channel. And I think by investing in that and making sure, so what I did was I made a schedule for the week. So the first, on Mondays, I post a prayer. And at first I was trying to kind of reinvent the wheel. Okay, what kind of prayer should I put? Where can I find a prayer book that gives me meaningful prayers? And then I realized, and I'm letting my secret out, but I realized I could just use the prayer of the day on Sunday mornings that we use in worship. And no one has ever came up to me and said, hey, we prayed that on Sunday, you're reusing it. And it's really made it easy, and people engage with it. I don't post any pictures with it. It's just there. It's there. It is what it is. It's a prayer to start your week. And so that's my Monday post. Tuesday, I post the video of our pastor's blog that he does. And then on Wednesdays, I do a devotion that our staff has written. Thursdays, I normally will do an announcement about an event. And when it comes to events, I'm very specific on making it known that it needs to be an event that reaches like the majority of people can be involved in it. Of our demographics, I try really hard to make sure our ministry leaders know, our volunteers know that, yes, Facebook is an effective platform, but it reaches a lot of people. And by trying to post something that only reaches a small group of people or a small group of our audience, I think sometimes alienates people or doesn't necessarily make them feel like, oh, well, this doesn't pertain to me, and their Holy Trinity's, posting only things for people with kids, or only for young people, or only for seniors. So I really try to make sure that what I post relates to the majority. And then Friday, I post the emphasis verse for our Sunday sermon. So I'm able to make it full circle. And anything else that I post is just extra. It's just bonus. So one post a day is all I do on Facebook. And I think it reaches who we need to reach. And we're able to get the engagement that I'm looking for, that I feel that is effective.
I like how you have a real nice mix of content and kind of news. Because often I'll see where churches are just posting all of their announcements on their social media, and it just becomes like another newsletter. But news is just a small part of your strategy, it sounds like, that you don't, especially when you're not targeting those really small audiences, but the things that are there for everyone. So that's fantastic. And now you
Yeah.
also have a couple print things that you do as part of your framework too, right?
Yeah, so we have something that is called the wrap. It's been called the wrap, I don't know for how long. It's spelled WRAP. I know it's a little cheesy, but it stands for Weekly Reminders and Announcements Page. And this is something that is seriously like the everyone in our congregation lives by it. And if it wasn't in the wrap, then I didn't know about it and it didn't happen. And so because I realized how important this little insert piece of paper that goes into our weekly bulletin is, I've chosen to embrace it. I've chosen that to kind of just let it be and enhance where I can. I am going to admit there is clip art in there. It's done in Word. Our executive secretary puts it together in conjunction with our pastor, our senior pastor, and it's something that yes, there's days that I'm like, oh, I really need to revamp this, but it works.
That's the
We
key.
put the graphics that I make and that go with events and things in it, but there are still some things that it just has been the way it is, and I know that it works. So as much as change is good, and maybe one day we'll get there, I feel that not changing it has been the best thing that we could do because it's effective.
Good. And you also have an e-news that you do. Is that the same thing as the wrap, or is that different?
It's very similar. So yes, I will kind of on Tuesdays at 10:30 a.m. is when our e-news goes out. And what I'll do is take the information that was in the wrap and put it into at least one sentence, maybe two sentences, and have kind of it listed out about what's going on at the church and the activities and the announcements. When I first started, it was something that went out on a daily basis, the eNews did.
Wow.
And it was something that, after evaluating it, we use MailChimp. And I realized that people were they were tuning it out. Like people just stopped opening it because they were getting it every day and it was overwhelming and they didn't know what to read. And before it was going out every day, it was actually something that was so long, like people were having to scroll and scroll and scroll. So I try to keep it very concise. And because our website is our home base, I'm able to say read more or register now. And I put a link. And if someone wants to know more about something, they're able to go to that. Additionally, I have made it where you have to choose to be enrolled in our e-news. I did not completely upload everyone's email and say, here you go, because I want people opening it and engaging it with it and making sure that we are getting the right read of percentage on who's opening it and knowing if it's effective because people chose to be in it. I also have it where people can elect to be segmented. So if you want the youth news and want to know what's going on with our youth, when you sign up, you click youth news, and there is an additional e-news that's only about youth that our DCE, she gives me all the information and I just plug it in and send it out. So it's really been a great tool for us.
I love that opt-in approach that you take because while it may seem like a lot of additional work, once you set it up, it works really well and it doesn't require a lot of maintenance, but you're giving people exactly what they're looking for. So that's fantastic. Well, I
Yeah.
was going to ask about your process for setting it up, but I think you shared a lot of that in that it was all based on in your own research and understanding of how effective that is. But what might be some of the downsides of a framework? Have you had anyone complain about the way you have approached your communications in this very structured manner? I don't know. I'm sure our audience is wondering, is there any downside to doing that? What would you say to that?
So, of course, I mean, you're always going to have someone that feels that you're not communicating in a way that's most effective to them. And I go back to understanding your audiences and knowing what reaches the majority and what is effective. It's also efficient for you as the communicator and as the person that is putting this information together. I also think it's important to evaluate your framework. I think a downfall would be getting set in that framework and not ever wanting to go back and evaluate it because, yes, I think that it's time. Our Facebook page is doing really well, and our YouTube is doing well, and we have a great following. And now I'm ready to add something else to that framework, another channel that's on a regular basis that we use. So I think the only downfall by setting a framework would be to forgetting to go back and evaluate it. I think going back and analyzing and evaluating is one of the most important things.
That's awesome. Well, you wrap up the blog post in a very good way because we start with the message being the most important thing. But the other why to your framework is really about cutting through all the chaos and the messages that people get and making sure each message is very meaningful. So, can you talk a little bit about the importance of doing that with your communications, of really focusing on each message?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like you mentioned, having meaningful communication and connecting with that audience, I think needs to be at the forefront of everything that you're doing because this world, we are constantly bombarded with information and it's hard to cut through the chaos. There is people are involved in different activities, so they're getting information from maybe their baseball team or their daughter's ballet class. So how can you make sure that they're getting through all of that chaos? Make sure that they're having that meaningful, getting your message and it's meaningful. So I think really just kind of thinking it through and connecting. Thinking about that content and thinking about how you're going to cut through that chaos and cut through the message by not being overwhelming. I've had members be like, well, we need to mail a letter out. This is something we need to mail a letter out. Well, I want someone to know that when they're getting a letter from Holy Trinity Lutheran Church, it's something really important. And it's something that you need to open this piece of mail because it's something that's important that's going on at Holy Trinity. So knowing what platforms or what channels you're going to use for certain messaging is important.
Very good. Well, to wrap up today, I want to take you back to Phoenix when we were having the presentation and the question that you asked. And it was really about this idea of feeling overwhelmed by all of the possibilities, by all of the things to do. And it sounds like the systems and the framework that you put in place have really given you a good, solid structure that you're not feeling overwhelmed by it. What advice would you give to the person who is feeling overwhelmed in church communications by all the work that there is to do?
Yeah, so I think just first take a deep breath. We're all in the same boat. I think knowing that going back to thinking about who your audience is. I think sometimes we get so wrapped up in, I need to do this, I need to do this, or someone suggested this, or a founding member said we should do this. And I think taking a step back and remembering your audience and remembering what you're doing and saying, wait, like, I don't have to do all of this. I know what I'm doing is effective. I can see the analytics. I can show people like this is working and it's working well. So I think just remembering that, taking a deep breath and knowing that there's other people out there. I know there's the Lutheran Communicators group, and I love seeing what other people are posting. It's very kind of inspiring, and knowing that I'm not alone out there. And, I think at the beginning, we talked about how, I am a communicator here at our church, and a lot of churches don't have that. And so there's someone that's considered the church communications person, but they're also wearing maybe another hat, the administrative assistant, or maybe it's the DCE because he or she knows a lot about technology and social media. And so I think remembering your audience and remembering that you're wanting to have a meaningful conversation with them, and evaluating what works for you will help you not feel overwhelmed and know that each week this is what I need to do. Like I have something on my little board and it says every week and it says good strategy solves problems, and I have a list and I say like, okay, schedule your social media on Facebook, do this, and it's each thing in my framework. Is the website updated? And once I've met what's in my framework for the week, I know it's okay, and anything else is just icing on the cake. So know you're not alone out there. So
That's fantastic. Thank you so much for that. And thank you very much for joining me today as we talk through this topic. For our viewers out there, if you would like to learn more about what Stacy is talking about today, you can check out her blog post on the Concordia Technology blog, concordiatechnology.org/blog. It's our technology and your ministry blog, and she goes into great detail with this, which is just fantastic. So feel free to leave a comment on the blog post or post a question on this video, and Stacy or one of us will be happy to get back to you. And hopefully this has been helpful for you to understand that there's a lot of options out there for having very effective communication without doing it all. So Stacy, thank you again for joining us today, and thank you to our viewers for watching, and stay tuned for next week as we have another topic about using technology in your ministry. Have a great day. Thanks.
yeah, thank you. Have a good day.